I feel like also, like with prenups or anything like that, if I probably wouldn't divorce a man I didn't want to be with if I knew I would be homeless or I wouldn't be in that great of a state after.
So you wouldn't sign a prenuptial agreement?
I think I would, because I would have my own money. So it doesn't matter.
But I mean, do you plan on having children at some point?
Yes.
And it's probably going to be optimal for you to stay at home with them, right?
I don't think so.
You're going to outsource it?
What do you mean?
You're going to outsource your children's being raised by other people? Or would you rather raise them?
I'm definitely going to be a big influence in my children's life. It's also part of why I want to go to the PA program for the lifestyle balance. So I'm definitely going to, I feel like I can also, with the help of my partner and I should both be able to raise our kids.
Yeah, but I mean, for just talking about what's optimal, let's say man has enough money so that you can stay at home with the kids. It would be optimal for you as the mother to stay home with the kids rather than outsourcing their raising to somebody who's not their mother, right?
I don't think I would need to rely on someone else that's not their mom. I think, like, of course you might need daycare and nannies.
Well, that's outsourcing, right?
Okay, but I would probably go with one of my family members, and
that's still outsourcing, right?
How many kids do you want?
Probably just like 2.
2 kids? Okay. All right.
Can I ask something?
Yeah.
Are you saying it's not possible to have a career in kids?
That's
No, of course not. It's possible. I'm talking about what's optimal. You think that it's a good idea to outsource the raising of your children to other people? It's not a good idea.
I'm
Why
sorry.
would it
I
be?
mean, men do it all the time, so I don't really see what your point
What
is.
do you mean? What do you mean men do it all the time?
Can men not have a career and raise kids?
No.
Are they not
So that's
involved in it?
that's the optimal portion, right? Is that the man has a career, right? So last I checked, in case you don't know this, but men can't breastfeed, for instance. Women can do that. It's the healthiest way to raise a child is on breast milk, not with formula. We have all the scientific data in planet Earth at this point to prove that. So at least within the first year of the child's life, the mom probably should be at home with the child. If that is the case, then the father probably is going to be working, right?
Yes, but I mean,
Yeah,
they've been doing it
so-
for centuries. Can you not breast pump and give the milk out?
Yeah,
outside of that?
sometimes women have all sorts of different troubles with this. They can't produce enough milk, they can't pump enough milk. There's all sorts of things which come up when it comes to breastfeeding. So I mean, optimally, the best thing to do is to let the baby latch on and drink, right? That's how we've been doing this for several thousand years now. It works pretty good. And they get very healthy because they get the correct nutrition from their mom. And by the way, a baby's entire immune system is essentially formed off of those nutrients. So yeah, it's pretty good for the children.
If that's your view on it, then.
Well, I mean, what's controversial about that view? A baby's entire, they're literally, like, this will affect their IQ, it'll affect their development, it affects everything. It affects their immune system. If you give a child who's developing poor nourishment, you're setting them up for failure. You'll set them up to be lower IQ, have behavioral issues, have all sorts of problems. Of course, it's optimal for their mom to be there with them, giving them affection and feeding them, right?
Okay, but where's the dad at? If he's
The
always
dad is working to enable the fact that the mom can do that.
But it takes 2 to make a kid, right? So it should take 2 to raise that kid. And
is
if you
taking
need
2
to
to raise
reach
that
out
kid.
and if she wants to work because she doesn't want to depend on her husband, then her getting care for her child shouldn't be a problem at all.
Well, that's not what we're talking about, though. You're just switching the issue. We're talking about what's optimal, not what is possible. There's all sorts of arrangements which are possible. You could technically raise a kid in the Playboy Mansion, but do you think that that's going to be good for the kid?
No, of course not.
No, of course not. Right. So it's not optimal. So the thing is like, if we're talking about what's optimal, not
But
what's possible.
how are you
what's
to say
optimal,
what's best for a
obviously,
kid?
is if mommy
For their kid.
can stay at home with baby and feed baby breast milk and take care and nurture baby. Obviously, that's optimal. Well, can you give me a single scenario where there's
Yes,
something more optimal than that?
So no, I'm not saying more optimal, but what if that's not a possibility? So my son had a tongue tie, and that's a medical
Had a what?
problem. As a tongue tie, it's a medical problem as to why he couldn't
What's a
latch on.
tongue tie?
It is underneath your tongue. It's the thing that is like right there. It's too long, so you have to get it cut. You have to go through a procedure to be able to latch onto your mother.
Okay.
So there are reasons, and there's, it's not just, breast milk
Well,
is
I
best.
don't even
but-
understand in that context. Didn't she just get the procedure and then breastfeed the kid?
I mean, yeah, you could, but do you want to cut your
Well,
child's
then
tongue?
what's the problem? What do you mean?
Is cutting your child's tongue optimal?
But, well, let's assume for a second that in this one case where almost nobody has this problem,
Sorry,
we go,
multiple
okay,
people
we'll make,
have
Yeah,
this
we'll make-
I had this problem.
Hang on. Let me make
Yeah.
the case and I'll let you respond. I promise. All right? Let's say in this one case you had to make alternative arrangements or you had to pump or something like this. It was less than optimal. Pointing at the outlier and saying that that's a standard we should promote seems silly to me. Yeah, I'm sure that there's going to be individual cases of health issues with children where you're going to have to make less than optimal decisions because you're in a less than optimal situation. But for the vast, vast, vast majority of all of humanity who exists right this second, clearly a woman staying at home with her children is optimal in comparison to outsourcing their children. That seems obvious, right?
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't?
Because you can't just say that everything, that it's the world is ridiculous right now. It's not like it was back in the day. It's not, that's not how things go anymore.
Because, Bill, yeah, it's not how it goes. If you say, well, I just demand that I go work and outsource my child care, then yeah. But the truth is that there's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and millions of families all over the world, all over the United States, all over South America, all over the place, who have dad go to work for very little money, and still, because they do all sorts of budget cuts in their homes, maybe they only have one vehicle, right? It's tough, but they make sure that mom can stay at home with kids because, well, they're going to get the best nutrition possible, and they're going to have their mom. What could possibly be more important to a baby than having their mom?
So let me ask, does that change how the child turns out?
Oh yeah, significantly changes.
So
the
then
results.
how
Hey,
does
hang on, I'll give you some examples.
then how does
I'll give you some- hang on, I'll give you some
if it
examples so
changed,
that you
then
know.
Can I add something?
So here's the examples. Yes. Not only does it affect their immune system, it affects their IQ, it affects their physiology, it affects their height, it affects their weight, it affects long-term problems inside of a human being's health. It also affects behavior. It affects behavior because you have detachment problems. You have all sorts of issues that come with the feeling of abandonment when childcare is outsourced away from the mom. And this is one of the most psychologically studied phenomenon on planet Earth, along with the nutritional values. And we see the results of mass inflammation in children, ADHD at all-time highs, depression, all of these different things. Much of this has been linked to the idea of the plastics that are inside of food, the lack of nourishment, lack of breastfeeding, and formula feeding.
So I would say I would agree. Maybe in the first year a child is born that a mother could take time off to really, really tend to her child. But my mom has worked a full-time job since forever. And I mean, I feel like I turned out pretty good. I got my...
Yeah, but here's the thing. Nobody's disputing that you can't have good results by doing things in a less than optimal way. Nobody's disputing that. Like, for instance, I suppose that I could start a bonfire with a hand grenade, right? Or I can start it with a match. I would just say that starting it with the match would be more optimal than starting it with a hand grenade. The idea here, hang on, the idea here is just to say, right, that yes, you can have good results and good children and people who are even with that. But I'm just saying that if we look at the stats and the data, we can clearly see that most people have less than good results. And who knows how you would have turned out had mommy stayed home with you the entire time. Could be vastly different.
Can I say something? Did you do everything the optimal way? And did your parents do everything the optimal way if you're putting the standard on everyone else?
Let's say for a second they didn't. Do you understand that when you make an argument, a two-quo fallacy, which is what you're doing right now, what about you? Wouldn't matter. Let's say for a second my parents did the opposite. They were both feminazis and they ran around with blue hair, right? They hated their children. They thought I was complete scum and they completely malnourished me. What in the world would that have to do with what was optimal or what wasn't?
I'm just saying that you're holding everyone to this ridiculous standard of every single
Not
thing
holding
having
anybody
to be an
to any
optimal
standard.
way.
All I said was what is optimal and what is not, looking for an argument for why I'm wrong. What standard have I held you to?
Do you guys agree that it's optimal?
Hang on, let her answer the question. What standard have I held you to?
If U.S. gave longer maternity leave and we were able to be with our children for that full 1 year, I guess I would say it's optimal, but many families cannot survive on one person's salary, especially with the economy. So right now, it's not.
Oh, yeah, well, then you need to explain why it is that it's the least rich demographic, the poorest people have the most amount of children.
What if
The poorest people who have the most amount of children also, right, have mom stay home while dad works, right? They're underneath that income threshold most of the time. And interestingly enough, what happens is the opposite. When you have middle class, they tend to do what's called family planning, right? And so they want to have kind of a posher lifestyle, and oftentimes they do that at the expense of the children.
I have
But
a question.
the demographic that has the most kids is poor people, though, right?
How long do you think then a woman should optimally stay home with their child? What age is it okay for them to then resume their work?
I think that they should stay home with them until they're nearing adulthood.
But we send kids to school for the whole day when they're in kindergarten.
Do you guys want to work though?
I think they should be homeschooled.
Okay, that was
And I
going
think
to be my
instead
question.
of
Do you
using
think they should
our
just
best,
stay at home the
I
whole
think
time?
that instead of using our best and brightest to go into office buildings all the time, right? And go work as sandwich makers and work in the service industry, which is where we send them all the time, right? Most of them aren't being doctors and lawyers. They're mostly working as waitresses and in the service industry. I think instead of wasting women there, we should take our best and brightest and have them raising the next generation of the best and brightest. That's what I think.
I say that because I actually was homeschooled my entire life, essentially. But there's definite bad things to homeschooling as well. You don't get the social connect you need between people of your own age, so that hinders you completely.
No, completely the opposite. In fact, the public school system, because of the way that it's set up, if you homeschool, all of the extracurricular activities which your property taxes go to pay for, you can enroll your children in all of them without ever sending them to that school. So if you want them to be on the wrestling team, the football team, the volleyball team, the cheerleading squad, or any of these different things, guess what? You can just send them right along because your tax dollars pay for all that. The school can't tell you anything different if you're inside the curriculum. So that's completely wrong. The socialization aspect of it has been well studied. They're not antisocial. They graduate much earlier than children outside of the homeschool curriculum. They do better long-term in most longitudinal studies than people who go to public school.
But I was homeschooled, yes, and that was not the case where I lived. Not to mention, I was not homeschooled by my parents. I was homeschooled by a computer, which is what a lot of homeschoolers are doing nowadays. They sit in front of their computers, their family still goes off to work.
Yeah, what do you think you do in a public school?
Okay, but that raises the same point then. Do
Yeah,
you not
what's the
feel more
point, man?
neglect if you're being kept at home away from everyone else and your family is then also
You're not
having
being
to do
kept
their
away
own
from anyone
life?
else. So this is full of red herrings and kind of false anecdotes. How are you being kept away from everybody else because you don't have to go to a pee-wee prison where you're locked in a room for 8 hours a day, right, and forced to learn shit you don't care about? That seems like it's completely suboptimal, in fact. You know why that exists? That system exists because working parents need babysitters. That's why school lasts 8 hours, even though every single study we look at shows that young children do not do well when you go past somewhere around 3 to 4 hours of daily education. They don't do well. But we make the day that long so that parents can go and work and be cogs in the economy. Does that sound like it's a good deal? Doesn't sound like a good deal to me.
Speaking from my own personal upbringing and experience as someone who was homeschooled my entire life, when you're growing up and you see the quote-unquote, let's say a normal childhood, you see kids going off to school, hanging out with their school friends, participating on these clubs that are in school, doing all this. When you don't get that as a child, and you were not allowed to get that as a child in that normal experience, you feel a certain way about it. Almost anyone I know who is also homeschooled also has felt that certain way about it, and it takes a little bit to get over that because you're jealous for a while of people who got to do that.
What? I'm sorry. Didn't you say that you graduated at 14 and went to college? Yeah, I guarantee you that most of these public school kids who had to stay in the Pee Wee prison until they were 18 and their senior year in high school, they were taking nothing but electives because they just needed to warm a seat so the school got federal funding, would vastly have preferred to have graduated at 14 years old and gone on with their life.
And every